Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. When it comes to EVE news, we don't have a lot for TQ, but I did read about like a final hurrah for the Serenity server that apparently is being shut down to then be replaced with a very different, fresh start for their version of EVE Online. The map is completely different, with highsec basically being the border area that's surrounding lowsec, that's then surrounding nullsec. Very interesting concept, but completely different as well is the way the server is going to work. Like, there's probably going to be pay-to-win mechanics, and then you've got like insurances that your ship needs to be destroyed several times. So they're definitely moving away from the hardcore sandboxy EVE Online that we know and have, but it's pretty cool to see how those things are evolving as well. And then for our news, while I haven't really seen too much new stuff come to TQ last week, we will have a mass test next week, I should say, that's going to focus on audio improvements. So if any of you guys is interested, 1700 EVE time, on Thursday, I believe it is, we will have another mass test for our version of EVE Online. Let's, as always, take a quick look at the New Eden store, see if there's anything happening here. Not noticing anything that says sale on it in big large numbers. Quick look at the services. Nope, that all seems to be the pretty regular stuff. All right, that means that we get to move on to the market pretty quickly, and we will start with the pilot services coming in at 155. Like that, and we will of course start with plex. That is that's a very bad data point here, or a max price range for today. That's not very realistic, so let's try to get that chart to show up. And we do see on that 5-day moving average and that daily average and the 20-day moving average that we're still on the upswing for the price of plex, still trying to absorb all of the changes that have happened when it comes to the cost of these types of services for real life money. And you can see today's daily averages is already at the 1-year high point yet again. Volumes are stabilizing despite the increased price, as far as I can tell, staying below 1 million traded a day on most days though, so it's definitely down from when plex was going for less than 3 million and was costing a lot less for, well, a lot. It's all relative of course, but less real life money to purchase, so supply was higher as well. We are now above 4.4 million for the sellers and above 4.2 million for the buyers. I think here buyers are basically giving up. I think they tried to defend 4 million for a while, but it's just unstoppable. The cost is going up, as I think it's mostly supply that will be dwindling. For the multiple pilot train certificate, we've got a slightly different picture. Feels like we might be reaching a plateau above 1.75 billion on this one. You can see 5-day moving average merging with the 20-day, and then the daily moving average starting to hobble around the place a little bit. So on this one, we're at just below 1.8 billion for the sellers, and buyers coming in at 1.7 billion. There's not a lot of buyers here anymore either, but what I would say is a little bit different. We should definitely, I should say there's actually all the buyers have moved to the Tranquility Trading Tower, is that they have also basically given up on trying to get really cheap multiple pilot train certificates. They are chasing those sell prices as well. And again, you can see that since like May, the volumes have gone down. Although a lot of that volume can still be attributed as well to a couple of sales that CCP has done that brought the price back down to 1.25 billion at a point and brought in enough supply to keep the trade alive for a little bit. Then we've got the skill extractors that are also doing something slightly different from plex, showing that first sign that maybe a plateau is in the works as well. You can clearly see how the daily and 5-day moving average is flattening out and the 20-day moving average catching up very quickly. Those could merge as well, could be our first signs that a plateau is in the works. Must be said as well that it is on a dwindling volumes here too. Then the impact on the injectors. Here are the large-scale injectors that are doing a bit of a catch-up, I would personally say, to what's been happening with plex and thus with extractors. So we get a massive boost in the last 2-3 weeks from 800 million up to the current price point. 1 year high point yet again. Actually a very quick move here in just a couple of weeks. There is a little bit of hesitation that's starting to build with the daily averages and the ranges for the min-max, but it's pretty obvious that large-scale injectors were lagging a little bit on the new cost of the real-life items on the pilot services, and they shot up to 861 million. So from 800 to 860, that's almost a 10% increase, quite massive. And then 820 million for the buyers that have also basically given up and gone straight past 800 million now in order to get that large-scale injector. For the small-scale injectors, should not be able to buck that trend. No, an even sharper rise in just 1, 2, 3 days. We went up above 180 million. That was a little bit too much too fast. So on some volumes, we're starting to come back down. Quite obvious as well that I think some investors were looking at that and saying, if I can sell 180, 175 plus, I am going to bring those to the market, keeping things in check just a little bit. So again, showing that the small scale injector is different from the large scale injector, despite the fact that you would expect it to just be basically very closely related, because you just divide large scale injectors into small scale injectors. That lower price range and higher volumes may make for more volatility in this one. 174 million for the sellers and 163 million for the buyers. Then we still have the daily alpha injectors that went above 50 million last week and are continuing to build on that 1 year high point, getting close to 60 million in the last couple of days. That's going to be interesting to see how the player base and CSP is going to react to this one, because now an alpha player has to earn, well, let's say 63 million if you want to buy it straight off the market for a daily alpha injector. Buyers here are still trying to bring things down a little bit at 52 million, but honestly, considering the rest of the pilot services that we've seen here, I think they'll give up and head straight for 55 million in short order, unless they are also waiting for CCP to do something about this situation. We'll see whether or not they do. And finally, we get the hypercores that, of course, under this general inflationary scenario of just higher prices for these services, is continuing to go up as well. Another 1 year high point for the hypercores at 473,000, buyers coming in at 450,000. So we're still basically reeling and increasing in prices due to the changes that CCP has done to the subscription costs and the cost of all of these services. Next up, we've got the minerals, 745. Let's get started as always with our high-sec minerals. Here is tritanium that, well, is perhaps giving back a little bit more ground than what we would like to see, but it's trying to hold on when it comes to those sell prices. So one seller at 359, but most 377, 378. The problem is still the volumes. You can see here 1.2 billion units is going to keep 380 in check for quite a bit. If we could get past that, you can see here volumes are down a little bit, but at just below 390, we get another 1.2 billion units waiting. So it's really a little bit too much supply for the general demand or the daily demand, I would say. While there is still some demand above 350, here's another 2 billion and 2 billion trying to be bought. In general though, there's a little bit too much tritanium coming in. Considering the general state of industry, I would personally still say that it's not that bad. It's above 350, even for those buyers. So selling at least part of your tritanium to me makes a lot of sense. Then we've got pyrite that's basically doing the same thing, right? Losing a little bit of ground, not at the 1 year low point though. And I would say still in a decent spot. 9 ISK for the sellers. 874 for the buyers, but the same warning, the same problem. 600 million, 600 million. We are going to, in all likeliness, go below 9 ISK pretty soon. If that happens, I would definitely start to look at switching it up a little bit when it comes to selling pyrite that you're making right away. On the Mexalon front, we got a little bit of a bump that we saw last week, if I'm not mistaken, went up to 70 ISK. But just like with some of the other items, there are investors, I think, waiting as well to take advantage of any of these higher prices at the moment, and they brought that back down to 63.65 for the sellers, 60.66 for the buyers. So that's actually a pretty narrow margin between sellers and buyers. It does show that it's a slightly different dynamic here in the Mexalon market. Sure, it's old reserves, like here 100 million units being brought in at 68, and then in all likeliness just below here we get another 15 million coming in at when it was above 72, so and another 50 million here competing. So there are still some big investors, you could say, or hoarders that are going to try to take advantage of these higher prices, making it difficult for these to stay. But I do feel that you can see for Mexalon that it's a slightly different situation, a bit more of a bottleneck for nullsec, and so there is that more sustained extra demand that is keeping prices above 60, at least for now. On the low-sec front, we've got Isogen that is doing okay in my book, heading back towards 400 ISK, trying to stabilize at that. And same story yet again. I do think that when investors and people that still hold that old Isogen see sell price above 400 ISK, they see that as an opportunity, and sometimes, especially now during the low activity in EVE Online, that spooks the market very quickly, and so you've got these average prices that are actually staying just below the 400 ISK mark. Sellers coming in at 398, and you can see here 399.50 is when we come to our 20 million units, 402 another 20 million units. So I think it's pretty obvious that that's what's happening. 382 for the buyers, leaving a little bit of margin, understanding that demand is not that strong that we're gonna push straight back to all of these bigger reserves on a regular basis, and so they're able to get relatively cheap Isogen if you consider 400 to still be a cheap price. But over the last weeks, Noxium has shown that low-sec minerals have been going down in price, and at least in the last couple of weeks we have stabilized just above 750. On the 1 year chart, it's not a great price, 823 for the sellers, 807 for the buyers, and whereas here in winter, January, February, those months, it was really Noxium that you could hunt for to get that best return for your mining efforts. At the time it was the most expensive Tech 1 mineral, but it has lost almost 50% of that price point, and then of course at the same time our nullsec minerals have shot up in the last couple of months, like here Zydrine trying to stay above 2k, just below that 1,990 for the sellers, 1,929 for the buyers, and here you don't see those big investor volumes coming in with 50 million units of Zydrine. Here we get real drought of availability. Could be a little bit of cartel stuff happening as well, because nullsec is far more organized, but I've seen a couple of posts as well on the subreddit that there's still some battles happening here and there with some of the big groups, so they're all as well deployed, and they've got a fly to defend rather than to do huge amounts of mining and things like that. So 2000 ISK for Zydrine, and Megasite stabilizing at the current price. But again, you can see in the last 6 months, especially in the last 3-4 months, we went up to 1635 for the sellers and 1590 for the buyers. So extremely expensive nullsec minerals at the moment, and yeah, especially pyrite, maybe titanium as well. I think risking falling off towards 1 year low points, that is where I would definitely look at other options. We finally have a Morphite in the minerals that's doing something uncharacteristic as well, I would say, doing a bit of a jump back well above 40k on the price chart. Now it's not that bad, it's basically the same price range we've seen since May, so it's not that terrible, but it might show as well that there is a price to be paid with all that lower activity in general in the game. Perhaps the little bit of action that is to be found in nullsec is then driving any active players towards that playstyle rather than mining as well. And this could be the first sign that all of these higher Zydrine, Megasite prices, and now also the jump in Morphite is due to lower supplies coming in from lowsec. 43,500 for the sellers, 43,000 for the buyers. They again have to stay very close, completely dependent on the importers of this mineral. Let's move on to PI and see what's happening here. 1430. definitely doing a pretty fast one, and you may guess why. Can't wait to get back into the Path of Exile League, which I think will also exacerbate numbers in EVE Online a little bit. But yeah, League launch once every 3 months. I am there for this one. So let's get started. Here are the broadcast nodes that are still doing really well. 1.5 million for the broadcast nodes, easily defended here for the sellers, and just below that for the buyers, showing that strong demand. Quick side note on this one, last week I also did a setup of PI in Galente space, where I'm planning to do more flying in the upcoming weeks and especially months when the more information comes out on the faction warfare update. And I basically went like all over the place, completely different planets, different types of things, and you know, we'll just see how that works out. But yeah, let's move on to the construction blocks then. And very strong, and in my opinion a complete surprise, super strong summer here. Late August we shoot up above 10,000 disc in a pretty substantial way, and yeah, 1 year high point for construction blocks. 10,400 for the sellers, 9,930 for the buyers. So very high prices, showing that strong demand and maybe not enough supply. I think there's actually plenty of supply. If we look at this, it's just really strong demand, so there must be at least some industry activity happening. I can only assume that it's large ships in nullsec that have found their way back into certain routines, and that means they need that PI. We've got coolants doing the same thing. Didn't think we would see that, but very interesting. So by last week I thought we would look at least some capitulation, and because some of those that have really low volumes on a daily basis were starting to break down a little bit below the average prices, at least for the last couple of months. But yeah, here is coolants, another breakout, and despite the nerf to water, that's like half of coolants in the general economy, so really a harsh nerf actually. We are back above 10k, right? 11,500 for the sellers and almost 10,000 disc for the buyers. Very impressive, great prizes, and definitely worth it in my opinion to look into PI even from high sec. Yeah, you're getting some pretty damn juicy returns at the moment. Enriched uranium continuing the trend of going up in the last week or so, back above 10k as well. 10,800 to 10,300, very expensive. Integrity response drones losing a little bit over the last week, but look at where we are. Definitely high range, well above 2.5 million. Super expensive at 2.7 for the sellers and almost 2.6 for the buyers, showing that very strong and substantial demand despite the lower activity. Mechanical parts doing another 1 year high point as well. I did not expect this, but it's happening across the board, so it's pretty structural. 13,000 for the sellers, 11,600 for the buyers. Definitely great time to have some PI lying around and to be looking at some sell opportunities. Miniature electronics confirming the trend. Here, well above 10k at 13,500 for the sellers, so another 1 year high point. This is not the summer that I envisioned, on much lower activity and, well, player base not really knowing what's going to happen next outside of that faction warfare update. But it does look like perhaps what's happening is that the stability of knowing there shouldn't be any revolutionary changes to capital ships and their production in at least the foreseeable future, so they are banking on doing that, and they're building a lot of these ships at the moment. I think that's what's happening. Nano factories trying to head back above 1 million, not really able to do so, but just below that for the sellers and almost 900k for the buyers. Organic mortar applicators having a little bit of a tougher time. Not all of these advanced PI materials can be winners of the Siege Green update. 720 to 668. Difference is it's a tiny margin. I think that again shows that there is demand. Recursive computing module flat for the week, just below 900k. Buyers are also above 800,000 discs, so that demand really does seem to be across the board. Here is robotics, another 1 year high point, heading for 80,000 disc here, 77,000. This might be a lack of supply that's starting to come in, and for the first time in a very long time, we're seeing 100,000 disc coming into play on the on the front page of the sellers, and that is my historical perspective for robotics though. I know that I used to make those because you can make them on some, I think it's like plasma planets or something like that. Just from raw materials into robotics. It's pretty slow, of course, but I would always be able to sell them above 100,000 discs. So this is very interesting how this is yet another one-year high point. Then we get rocket fuels, confirming the trend here. Refined PI material, 12.5, 13,000 disc sellers, 13.5 the other seller after that. So it's really not that much supply, and demand is stronger, pushing these prices up. Buyers well above 10k as well. Self-harmonizing power cores, able to easily stay above 2 million discs. So another one of these advanced PI materials that has won a lot with the Siege Green update, 2.1 and to 2 million for the buyers. Smart fab units, here is that, you know, sign that we saw last week that maybe the late summer and increased activity is actually going to bring prices down, but it looks like that the increased activity that a post-summer might bring, but that's really not happening at all. And what we're seeing is basically those that are struggling with the daily volumes are the ones that are having a lot of time. So this one are still at 61,000 to 52,000, really big margin between sellers and buyers, but the main reason is just that it's not traded as often as all of the others that we've seen here before that make one-year high points. Sterile conduits staying pretty flat, 940 to 872. Supercomputers, again, not great on the volumes, but at least it's going up then. Counter to what we would have expected, and it's really a drying up of the item. 83,000 for the sellers, 73,000 for the buyers. We will see. My expectation honestly is that this will get plugged by next week, because it is a low volume item on a daily basis. There's going to be a couple players out there that have supercomputers and are going to see this and are going to say, all right, we're going to start selling at this point. Synthetic oils, another exception here, working its way back down to 7k, 7.7 for the seller, 6.3 for the buyers. Definitely at the low end of the range at the moment. Synthetic synapses able to defend that margin that is gained for the implant event that happened here. So this one is tied to implants, a little bit different, but not really going towards 70k at all. 93 to 81,000. Same thing with transcranial micro controllers, staying really high, well above the range for the year at 89,000 for the sellers, 76,000 for the buyers. It's going to be interesting, as I've said, to see if those specialized PI materials make their way back to 100,000. Water-cooled CPU, yeah, again, terrible volumes. We've seen that throughout the last couple of months, 4.5 to 4.1, so that's not one of those winners. And then finally, wetware mainframes, staying well above 1.5 at 1.6 million for the sellers and almost 1.6 for the buyers, again showing that strong demand. So quite a surprising week here, in all honesty, for me for PI. I thought we would see more signs of a top being formed in PI in general. The reason I thought that was gonna happen was moves like this, but looks like I was completely wrong on that, and actually a lot of the more popular, you could say, or more used PI materials with big volumes have just shot up to one-year high points yet again this week. So super strong summer for those that are looking to make bank for their PI, from their PI. After that, our advanced moon materials, 23.25. On this one, I don't think I put down the buy order, but I have remade the folder so that I can keep you guys up to date on the investments that I'm trying to make. But let's get started then, because I did put in a buy order for one of these, but it failed. So let's get started. Crystalline carbonite for Galente, back above 100 disc, 106 to 98, so still very, very cheap. Obviously not able to break out of the range, but it's away from the one-year low point, and so I'm not interested in buying this one at the moment. For Caldari, we've got titanium carbide, easily defending the range as well at the moment. Again, not a great price on the one-year chart, but compared to everything else, a 145 to 140 for the buyers is pretty damn good. Then we've got Fernite carbide for Minmatar, that's back above 100 as well, 104 to 93. And then tungsten carbide for Amar is staying well above 125 here, 133 to 127. So it may be that our buy opportunities in the carbides is over, that was like May, June, July, when we went below 100 discs, sometimes on all of them or close to all of them, at least over the period of a couple of weeks. And we may be just late, which I think, was it the metamaterial? I'm really not sure, honestly. It was early last week that I put up the buy order, but I have tried to still grab an investment in advanced moon materials when it was at a 1 year low point and still on the down slope for the prices, but even that didn't work. So I think across the board here we can see all of these are at least trying to form a bottom and are not moving down to new lows at this point. See what the future brings, of course. Let's move on to the metamaterials, see how they are responding. So for Galente, it's photonic metamaterials. Yeah, I think it's a metamaterial though, and so this is a chart where I would say that looks like we could try to make a move to come in. 7152 to 7100 for the buyers, really narrow margin, but super close to 1 year low point. And on this chart, that's something to consider. Then we've got Caldari is non-linear metamaterial, same story. Look at that, testing the lows again as well. I may have tried to buy here and was just too late, something like that, I'm not sure. 11.4 to 11.2, so super narrow margin again, but very close to bottom prices. Yeah, if I were to invest in advanced materials, I'd move away from carbides at the moment, and I would look at these cheap metamaterials. So then we've got Minmatar, which is plasmonic, same thing, bottoming out, not able to do the 1 year low point, but definitely showing signs of strain. 10.7 to below 9,900 for the buyers. I'd say that's a buy opportunity below 10,000 disc. And then finally for Amar, terahertz metamaterials, that's actually trying to make its way back above 10k, but still below that for the sellers, and at 9.6 for the buyers. So in all likeliness for this week, I'll try again for the metamaterials. For the other advanced moon materials, let's see how but yeah, the carbides, that's first time I'm really starting to feel like maybe we have bottomed out here and we won't test even lower prices. Perhaps the others can give us an indication as to what's happening. Well, for fermionic condensates, a new 1 year low point is definitely coming into play. 36 to 32, that would be another potential buy. Then we've got ferrogel breaking down back below 20,000. Not a 1 year low point just yet, but clearly the pressure is here as well. Fulleриdes 500 disc, but coming up from just another 1 year low point when they touched 400 disc. Hypersynaptic fiber still slowly going back towards 5,000 disc, where obviously the buyers are waiting, like myself. Nano transistors, so 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, bottomed out below 2.5, a little bit of recovery from that, but again, it's not looking too great. Phenolic composites, not a 1 year low point, but again under strain. Pressurized oxidizers, these ones are doing a little bit better, so those newer items, that looks a little bit more like a bottom may be forming at 9,150, but buyers are still well below 7,800. That's a big gap between sellers and buyers, so just a little bit of supply could push this right back down. Reinforced carbon fiber, definitely at the low end of the range, not a 1 year low point, but pretty much close to it. And then here is what that actually worries me. Ceramic fibers heading back towards 200 disc, 209 to 202. That is very low yet again. So I'm still not sure, guys, if we've seen the bottom in advanced moon materials. Carbides are trying to do that, but everything else is seeing so much pressure that I'm not sure that they can keep the gains that they have made in the last couple of weeks, and the loss of volatility there. So it's still pretty risky in my book to invest in these, riskier than our next segment where I have made some moves. Unfortunately, I didn't keep track of exactly what I bought at what price, but I'll start doing that again from this point on. But yeah, Tech 2 coming in at 29.05. And you may already have seen that a little bit before. I also tried to move in on a Machina since I decided that mining ships would be the extra product for the week. So let's get started and see what's happening. Here is the Basilisk, which I have bought one, I think. But that was another nice bottoming out at 100 million. Very clear buy opportunities. Buyers did come in as well, but look at how careful they are. 130 not coming into play just yet. 120 to 112 for the Basilisk. Cerberus landing on a 1 year low point, and I bought one Cerberus on this downslope. Not exactly sure if it's gonna be the bottom price, but I feel pretty good about it. 130 to 124 now for the Cerberus. Then I bought a Curse because I was planning to use it as well. A little bit of volatility here as we went well below 130 on the bottom range, and now we're at 137 to still 119. Buying below 120 for a Curse is pretty damn cheap. So to me, it feels like the pressure is still on. You can still see those stops are going lower and lower. Eventually, the bottom could fall out of all of this. Damnation, a little bit of a bump, but really nothing to write home about. 280 to 255. Something like the Deacon, slight jump up here as well. Minimum range is staying close to 15 million. Yeah, still below that. 18 million for the buyers. It's just a dead market basically. Then we get the Eagle, made its way back to 150. Bought one of these on the downslope here, so really happy with that one. 152 to 140. EOS continuing to go down, so I bought mine I think on this slope, maybe even this slope, because I'm planning to use it, but sometimes I buy early as well, of course. Look at the current prices. So I think I bought mine to 254, something like that. 223 million for the sellers, 220 for the buyers. Guys, if you're ever planning to own and fly an EOS and you always hesitated because it was a command ship that was going for like 400 million ISK, this is your opportunity to grab one really half the price of what it used to cost. So that's very, very nice. Then we've got the Ares, super low as well, 1 year low point in the last couple of days at 33 to 28 for the buyers. Flycatcher, same story. Look at that, touched 40 million. Some investors come in, and this is the tiny little bump that interest has been able to create. Absolutely nothing. 40 million to 39 million here, super low. Guardian, below 130, very close to 1 year low points yet again. 129 to 114 for the buyers, so that looks really nice as well. Unfortunately, starting to move back up, so the investors spotted it and have started to push or bid the prices back up a little bit. But if you can spot this downside, yeah, you're definitely there. Put up a buyer at that point of 114, 115, you're grabbing that Guardian. Next, we've got the Heretic, sustained close to 40 for a while, and look at that, back at the 1 year low point, 32 to 30 million for the buyers. Get rid of this one, and you're buying a Heretic below 30 million. Last year it was 60 million ISK. Hound, yeah, not the best spot, just below 20. Buyers are at 17.6. That's a no. Iquitursa continuing to lose a little bit of ground from that 500 million price range, 470 to 456 for the buyers. So definitely also another thing to consider. While I already have two, I think, Iquitursas myself. If you're interested ever in flying Triglavian ships for yourself, these are pretty damn good prices. The Ishtar, one of my favorite ships, finally a bit of a bump. It continued to go down for so long. I was starting to worry how low we would go, but when it gets below 130, some people are coming in to buy that Ishtar. 135 to 125 though, so hardly a bump, and super high pressure on these prices almost across the board. Look at that Kirin, logistics frigate, Kaldari, so for shield fleets, very interesting. This could be one of my next moves, for instance, especially if I would look forward to perhaps the Alliance tournament. Maybe this is one of those point fillers that could find its way into a little bit of need. That could be one of those possible trades. 14 to less than 11 million for the buyers. Manticore, no, that's no man's land, right? We need to be close to 15 before we jump in. Nemesis, same story, so it was like 3 weeks ago that we could have bought. Nighthawk's more interesting. Look at that, touching 250 million yet again. Below that now for the sellers, 221 for the buyers. Super cheap Nighthawk, another command chip. I like this one as well. I think it's got 5 small drones, missiles, shields. Really potentially a very nice PvE platform. Oneros went to 1 year low point. Couple of investors coming in, pushing us back above 100 million, but yeah, 101 for the sellers, 81 million for the buyers of the Oneros. For a logistics, Tech 2 logistics cruiser to be 80 million in range is super cheap. Then we get the Purifier, again, in no man's land, don't want to be really buying or selling here. Ruxing, more pressure, but not enough for me to make a move. The Saber, yeah, bit of recovery, but it's super slow. It's really not very spiky. Scalpel had a nice little spike here when we touched 10 million very closely. We then shot up to 20 million. We're starting to lose ground though, so again the pressure builds up right away. 17 million, 14 here, 20 here, 16 here. So many ships being brought at any sell opportunity that this gets crushed super quickly. Scimitar next, also close to 1 year low point, not yet there. We touched 100 million before, but 117 to 109, definitely cheap as well. And we're still on the right side of the downslope, so you know this is the time to put up a buy order below or close to 110, maybe even just above that if you absolutely want to be sure to grab it. But in this market you will grab it, so that's the good thing about this. Sleipnir back under pressure. But yeah, it's been super cheap for a while. I'd say if you're interested in this command ship, you should have it by now. 245 to 220, super cheap. Vagabond still below 150, and finally the Zarmas heading again for a 1 year low point. Our buyers below 400, no, 405 for the buyers, 436 for the sellers. Not my ship, I'm not really a logistics pilot, but I know that these are used quite a lot as well. They are super capable. Maybe another one of those to consider for like an alliance tournament investment or something like that. But yeah, I have switched, I mentioned that last week, into looking at buying those cheap Tech 2 ships at the moment. I don't think that after the summer these types of sales will continue, and if it lasts for too long, I again do think that CCP will step in because these are basically crushing Tech 3 and faction ships, I think, at the moment. Next, we've got the Tech 3 ships coming in at 37.15. Let's get started with the destroyers, and well, just not moving anywhere. Volumes are abysmal, and I think again, as I just said, that this is because of how cheap Tech 2 is at the moment, and because the industry changes and the higher gas prices and needs in general, that these just have not become attractive anymore. 52 million to 47 million. Not really doing that well. Then we've got the Hecate staying around 55 million on average, 54 for the sellers, 51.5 for the buyers. And then we've got the Jackdaw, a little bit of pressure on this one, interesting. Buyers going below 50 million for the first time in quite a while, 53 to 49, but honestly, it's slow. Look at the volumes here as well. Very difficult to make anything move. Same thing with this Vapel. Yep, slight bump over the week. Starting to see a bit of volatility here as we touched 40 million on the minimum prices. We're at 47 to 40. Yeah, why would you buy this when you can buy a Tech 2 destroyer that's way cheaper, or a Tech 2 cruiser that's maybe double the price but for way more performance, in my opinion, way more hull as well. So that's still the problem, I think, for the tactical destroyers. Those that are not suffering from that are the cruisers. I think they're niche enough, powerful enough as well, that these still see trade, see usage. That's decently unique to them. And so here we do have, you can see here, some pretty nice charts that are actually tradable, although volatility has gone down, I think, on the lower activity in the game. Looking for buy opportunities in this market is also what I'm doing, like here when the Legion dropped off towards 150 on the minimum prices, right on this side of the chart in these couple of days. Could have definitely bought a pretty cheap one. Right now though, 186 to 172 million, that's probably your average range. I'd look to sell higher and to buy lower at this point. For the Loki, playing with pretty low points here. You can see last week went below 180 on the buyers, and it's still not great, I don't think. 189 to 179. So I again would say if you're looking to buy a Tech Tree investment, you are trying to buy a Loki below 180 million. On this chart, that's pretty damn good. Hope for some nullsec action, maybe a Loki fleet gets destroyed, a 200 million 2+ sell point is not impossible if we look at this chart. Proteus is too late, right? We were in that territory over the last 2 weeks almost, when you could buy really well below 180. We're now at 191 to 171. So you're still buying well below 180. There's no, I think you may already even have been able to buy below 170 at that point. But the problem is with sellers at 190 and the upslope, you're just gonna not trigger any of these buy orders. That's just because the range is too much, and that just incentivizes way more sellers to say, no, I'm not gonna dump it at 170, I'm gonna try to sell it at 189. And then finally we get the Tengu. That was last month pretty much. You could have bought these probably 165 or something like that. You can see that that has actually triggered on those minimum prices. We are now back in the 187 to 177 range. That's like, you could sell if you bought at the really right time, otherwise a bit too early maybe, and a bit too high to buy as well. So for Tech Tree, not the best week to looking at either jumping in or jumping out. The confessors, still the same problem. We'll see if CCP ever addresses that. But in general, if you're looking to trade, look at the cruisers rather than the destroyers at the moment. And then finally, we've got the extra products for the week, which are going to be the mining ships coming in at 41.30. There we go. So we're talking about ships, mining barges. We'll start with Tick 1. So here is the Covetor, seeing a bit of pressure and actually a slightly higher June-July. Kind of interesting. Lots of mining potentially happening here. Maybe even some replacements on some action in nullsec. Some mining fleets lost here and there. At the moment, right, lower activity. We also see probably lower supply from nullsec. So a lower need to replace all of these mining barges. And so prices are actually down at the moment. 43 million to 37 million. The Procurer, slightly better on the average price. The Retriever, excuse me, I misclicked. Here is the Procurer. Damn, these are bad charts. Actually up in price. That's interesting as well. And then the Retriever, pretty much flat. This might also be an indication that, in general, when it comes to miners, they're moving away from yield a little bit and investing a little bit more in defensive capabilities. Could be that same story in nullsec. If there's danger around, you might incentivize your members to leave the Covetors aside for a little bit and grab some Procurers so that they're a little bit more tanky. Buy yourself more time for your response fleet and things like that to come in. So I think that's my read on this one. Definitely interesting to see a Tech 1 segment that has a mixed picture, with the Covetor being down, the Retriever being flat, and then the Procurer being up in the last week or so. On Tech 2, which is where I put up my buy order, we've got the Hulk that's seeing some pressure, but yeah, nowhere near a 1-year low point after spiking up to 250 as well here in late July. So could really be the same story. Some action, some people going after miners, some Hulks need replacing. But at the moment we are absorbing that 189 to 177. Then the Machina is where I try or am trying to buy. One, you can see why, right? Last week we were going down, we were heading below 180, and my buy order was for, take a quick look at that, buy order 173 after tax, and that was the highest buy order at the time. So you can see I really tried. I was pretty damn aggressive, but maybe a little bit too aggressive. It may not happen, of course, because we can see what's happening with the Mackinac on sellers and buyers. 181 to 168. Oh no, then it triggered. I bought my Mackinac, I think the 171 range before taxes. It's 173 after taxes, so another Tech 2 investment has to be made considering what I'm seeing here. So I'm actually also going to move this one. Oh, I still need another one for holdings. Interesting. Yeah, I still need to work a little bit on that part of the folders to keep you guys up to date. But I grabbed my Mackinac, that is, and then I really should be paying more attention to the information, but I think it's pressure, right? Yeah, definitely pressure, getting close to 1 year low point. And then finally we've got the skiff, that is basically flat at around the 130 mark, 129 to 117. And I can ask again that very same question with a skiff at 129. Honestly, a procurer going for 43 million. It could be a skill thing, of course, I do understand that. But I think for most miners, yeah, you'd go for Tech 2. They are crushing it when it comes to the price versus what they are offering at the moment for Tech 2 ships. So I feel like that's perhaps an imbalance that CCP will eventually look at, which is why I've started to buy what I think is cheap. And then finally, I also still have the Orca that we can check. Let's see how that guy is doing, staying above 1.5 billion, so still very, very expensive. But you can see, I think, a little bit of that siege green update, whereas in March we went up to above 2 billion ISK. We have recovered and stabilized. 1.6 billion for the sellers, 1.5 for the buyers. Availability not that great. We do know that mining has moved away from an Orca fleet to a single Orca that is supporting the smaller types of ships. And so as a result, yeah, I think again Tech 2 is the value proposition of the moment for a lot of players, and it's oversupplied. How long will that last? Who knows, but I have started to buy. And yeah, that's going to be it for this EVE Talk then, guys. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.